Welcome to Thriller Bitcoin. Welcome to Thriller Bitcoin.
Let the sun from my eyes, let it burn my back. Let it sear through my thighs, I'll feel wide, wide open. Let the sun from my eyes, let it burn my back. At the beach in my dreams, but you're never gonna stop me. You're never gonna stop me. You're never gonna stop me. You're never gonna stop, king of the beach. King of the beach. Let the sun from my eyes, let it burn my...
I'm gonna push play here.
Let's hear it.
Because I really don't know any of this stuff, and I know
All
I know you're going to these places, so I would want your opinion on this. What are we looking at right there, Ben?
Okay, so this is Milei in a crowd of what I assume are supporters, Argentinians, and this is actually back in November when the runoff election occurred, at which he was ultimately victorious. So it's just showing the support the people have for him in this place where he's voting.
Dude, he looks like a rock star, man.
He has a rock star aesthetic. He's kind of a character. I appreciate that about him.
Look at him. He's like getting the people going and stuff. That's
yeah. He has a quote that I really like on the political front, which he says, "I didn't come to lead sheep, but to wake lions."
whoa.
Yeah, so he has a poetic sense as well.
Wow. So he's a poet.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. So what happened? I know he was he just, did he just come out of nowhere? Like how did he win this thing?
He was a local leader, I think, in Buenos Aires. He was one of some kind of official there. He also had a history in public broadcast and was kind of a commentator on politics from an economic perspective. Uh-huh. And I think that's one of the places he cultivated his aesthetic in terms of how he communicates and how he gets attention. And I think that's something to draw a lesson from, which is that you need a place to hone your message, to find your audience, and then to develop your character to have this kind of broader presence.
So this is one interview that he's done here. And,
Porque esto es interesante. El socialismo es siempre y en todo lugar un fenómeno violento, asesino y empobrecedor.
Is he trying to say that he's against socialism? Is that what he's running with? And that's why a lot of Bitcoiners are kind of open to hearing him speak, I guess.
Well, his economic background is he's an avowed anarcho-capitalist, and he's thoroughly read the Austrian economists and cites them often in terms of his political argumentation. And I think with respect to socialism, he has a particular way of vilifying it. And I think this is basically applying the populist lens. And part of populism is about identifying, you have to have some enemy that you're going up against. You're like, oh, we have to take down the swamp or whatever else. Yeah. And I think having you can galvanize the public with this kind of enemy, right? And Argentina, I believe, needs this because they have such a kind of deep culture and history of, government intervention in the economy, and they suffer for it.
Do you think it'll be a similar? I mean, obviously El Salvador is completely different, but do you think it'll be a similar path? Maybe they won't adopt Bitcoin right away, but do you think they'll see the light, or has he talked about any of that kind of stuff yet?
Sure. So their chief problem has been inflation. They have about 150% inflation in the past year, and the peso has declined from parity with the dollar some 10 years ago or something like that to the current exchange rate is around 1,000 to 1. So that you can think about how thoroughly you have to inflate your currency and how much you have to deprive from the people to produce that result. Mm-hmm. Basically, the government runs as a European social democracy except that they don't have the industry and the capital base to generate the taxes that fund the programs that they want to have. So instead they print the money.
Yeah. So we saw how fast El Salvador was able to adopt Bitcoin and really inject it into the,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is another element of where Milei uses this vilification. He vilifies the central bank. There was one scene where he like had a piñata representing the central bank for his birthday that he smashed with a cane.
Yeah.
And so this is like basically translating, like surfacing the public's anger about the financial situation and presenting it and identifying the cause and the target of it. And he's avowed to eliminate the central bank. And that would mean when he talks more extensively about this, he basically says that he wants a competitive market for currency where, the dollar will be one competitor, but so will Bitcoin. And so will these other kind of alternatives.
Interesting. Yeah. It's and he takes office in January, or did he, cause he won.
He took office.
Oh, he did?
On the 10th of December, I believe.
Has he done anything interesting?
Yeah. So his first act was to reduce the number of ministers by, I think it was down to 9 from like 26. So he just kind of eliminated some departments. I don't know. I don't know Argentinian politics well enough to know exactly the nuts and bolts and like significance of these actions. I also don't know what, I think there's much more that they're planning to do. One of the recent subjects is that there's an expectation of a public campaign of protesting or like blocking traffic. And so they've been communicating that they're not going to tolerate blocking traffic.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, they tried doing that here in Austin and during the whole riots and stuff. And that quickly ended really quickly when the rubber bullets came out.
Yeah, it's an interesting subject. It gets.
I mean, I don't mean to laugh if anybody got hurt or anything, but it's weird how like because people also, you can have your protests and everything like that, but some people have to go to work. Some people have to live their life. They don't have the luxury of rioting.
Totally. Like this came up on the libertarian subreddit. Where people thinking like, okay, how do we feel about this? Raising that question. And it's just this, right? Like you can't, according to the libertarian perspective, you can't use your freedom to impinge on other people's freedom. And if you're blocking traffic, you're basically like holding them hostage. And that's an aggressive act. It's not if somebody did that as an individual to another individual in a path somewhere, you'd be justified in defending yourself against them. And so that's...
yeah, I think it gets really interesting because like justification isn't necessarily truth, right? Like I think one of the biggest problems that we have in the world right now is everybody's trying to maneuver their truth in whatever light that they want. And there's actual truth. And then there's, there's things that people say are true, but are they actually true?
Yeah, that's a very deep and difficult question.
Yeah, it's very nuanced and we don't have to go down that rabbit hole, but
I tend to look from a moral perspective or political philosophical perspective. I tend to look to Locke and people who are kind of in his line of thought. And he would say, so the job of the political philosopher is to articulate a system that people agree with and that produces good results in the public. Mm-hmm. And I think Locke has a long history of that, being one of the foundational thinkers of the American Republic.
Yeah. Let's jump into, do you want to talk about the Bitcoin plus stuff that you'll be doing there?
Well, it's, that's right. So there's, Lisa's putting on a conference. I'm looking forward to being there and participating and giving a talk. I'm planning to speak about, NFC communications with respect to Bitcoin payments.
Cool. Yeah, definitely get your tickets. If you haven't got your tickets yet, it should be an awesome time. Bitcoin plus. Yeah,
Buenos Aires is a lovely city, and
yeah. What are you planning on doing there when you get there?
Well, I think you have to appreciate. I think it's a particularly good time to visit because of the changes that are occurring that are very interesting, and also because the currency is doing so poorly, has been doing so poorly for so long. the country is in a difficult spot financially, right? Like that, one of the reasons Milei was elected is that more and more of the population is becoming impoverished because of the central bank policies and whatnot. And so when you go there, it's very inexpensive. Basically everything's inexpensive. And you're like, some people might feel self-conscious about participating in that, but one of the reasons it's inexpensive is that they desperately need dollars. They need external currency to support their international trade, which is why it's, desirable.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely recommend checking it out. We'll put links in the show notes and, get your tickets. Cause, it sounds like a good time, dude. And then if you're going to be talking, I know did you do like an NFC Lightning
That's right. We did hackathon indeed. Yeah.
Yeah. And some cool stuff came out of there, right?
That's right. Yeah. We, there was one project around basically doing work like timekeeping, like clocking in and that kind of thing.
Yeah, that was cool. So definitely check out that. I can't wait to see all the footage from them. That's going to be a good time. So the other thing I wanted to talk on before we get into the developer stuff, because dude, you've been doing a lot of work here, man, since you've come to this place called Austin. So tell me about ACC Austin. What have you been doing on the ground? Because I don't know if you like to shine a light on the stuff that you do, but dude, you're doing it, man. Thank you, by the way.
All right. Yeah. So ACC is the American Conservation Coalition. It's it's an environmental advocacy organization that is pro-tech and pro-people. So one of the things the reason I came to the ACC is that I was raised an environmentalist. So my parents, like my father's, won a lifetime achievement award from Keep Flower Mound Beautiful, which is the local cleanup organization. Cool. And my parents have always composted and things like that. And in recent times, I was looking out over the online and in other places. I was seeing these very negative arguments around environmentalism. People saying, "Don't have children because they're bad for the environment." And then I ask, like, who are we saving the environment for, if not our children, right? It's
right. Yeah.
Kind of absurd. And I think basically the other thing that's happening is some groups are using environmentalism as cover as a justification for their ideology, which is, in this case, it's like, for example, you have people who they're like crypto communists, and they're saying, well, because of environmentalism, we have to implement all these government policies that basically establish communism. And like this is like the Sunshine Movement, I think it's called, or Sunrise Movement. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so with all these, I looked around and I didn't really see good arguments being made. And so I wanted to support this kind of alternative that represents the future that I believe in, which is a future of abundance, a future of transcendent humanity, where we're using technology to build a society that's very rich and supportive of everyone, but continuing to elaborate on its own possibility and complexity.
Yeah, so let's dive into that. Like, how does that actually look like, just from like grassroots level? Like, what do I need to do, or what do people that are listening to this in and around Austin, or even maybe they're in their own little cities or towns? Like, how do we move towards this kind of way, and like, what's the first step, and how does that process look like from step one? Yeah, so first you need the map to say, like, where do we need to go in order to achieve the outcomes that we desire? And then once you have that goal in mind, then you can kind of devise a practice to move in that direction. And so in this case, what we advocate for at the American Conservation Coalition is things like basically abundant clean energy through nuclear power. Nuclear power is it's a wonderful resource that it's extremely abundant in its power supply, and there's basically a generational gap in the understanding of what nuclear is, because we've had, as with all technologies,
the initial designs are poorly devised, have faults, and you experience issues with those faults. And as you iterate on the technology, you develop them up to a point where they're basically flawless. And in this case, we have these next generation reactors, which are designed in such a way that they cannot have these kind of negative outcomes that have, could occur in the past with meltdown and things like that. So, and we have very good reasons for pursuing that, right? You can just look at the example of France versus Germany. So France has been powered by nuclear power throughout its history, basically since it's been possible. And Germany recently decommissioned its remaining nuclear power.
Really?
Yep.
Wild.
Because of the Green Party in Germany, basically the sort of, it's another example of one of these kind of negative environmental arguments, right? Where it's counterproductive, because in this case, they decommissioned the nuclear power and they replaced that with coal, and coal puts out a lot of radioactive results as a byproduct of its burning. And it also, it's a lot of particulates. It causes various kind of issues like stroke and whatnot.
So once you get the energy, it sounds like once you get the energy in place here in your own community and stuff like that, then yeah.
So that's one example. Abundant energy, and there are many different kinds of ways of supplying energy. The biggest one that's kind of missing, the sort of least, the underutilized resource, I think, is nuclear power, and so that's why we advocate on that, is to kind of build the political will to change the federal policies to make that more possible. Another area would be housing abundance, right? So if housing isn't abundant, then cost of living is high, and people have to sprawl out, right? Because they have to build in these like far-flung places.
Yeah.
Whereas if we do a lot of infill development, there's plenty of housing costs are low, so living is relatively easy, and it also, people don't produce a lot of carbon and whatnot through their transportation.
And would this community, would they be all set up in a sort of like a shared grid or of a sort? Ideally, they would want to sustain their own energy, right? Not to rely off of others, or it doesn't matter?
No, I wouldn't say it matters. I think it depends on whatever the context is in which the housing is built. So like in the city we have, I guess pretty much everywhere we have grid connectivity. If you want to have independence, then you can supplement that with your own supply, and then you have optionality around that, but it's not required.
Okay, interesting. And so when you had this lady here, I guess Nicole Nozick,
mm-hmm.
what was this about?
Yeah, she was arguing, presenting the environmental argument for YIMBY policies, and just to explain, the term YIMBY stands for yes in my backyard, and it's contra the not in my backyard housing, the people who will generally argue for like neighborhood preservation and, yes, you should build housing, but not here. These people exist. They exist in Austin. They, in this case, she was making this environmental argument in support of a policy that the city council had been considering.
Yeah, so explain this a little more fleshed out. So she just wants to reduce carbon emissions, build more homes closer to job centers. Yeah, so I guess closer to downtown, I guess?
So
what is she?
So the Austin City Council was considering something called the Home Act, which was about giving property owners the ability by right to build up to 3 units on their single family zone property.
Okay.
And so the idea here is to open a pathway for more basically townhome developments. Like you can imagine them as like the skinny tall houses, where you have like a row house.
And so this would create more housing. New townhouses, it looks like a graphic. New townhouses less than other new single family homes in Houston.
So by making this possible, by allowing property owners to do this, then anyone who's looking to redevelop their property has an option of redeveloping it in a different way.
Gotcha.
So instead of building a single large home, which would be a mansion in these like highly valued areas, they can build 4 or 3
Gotcha.
smaller, like could be normal sized homes, but set up as townhomes so that there's more optionality. And the point is to accommodate more people and also to make housing more in these desirable areas more accessible to kind of middle income people who are young professionals and whatnot. Then you can have young families living in basically starter homes in desirable areas. And that, that's good for the young families and it's good for the community as well, I believe.
Yeah. And you also, I feel like I see that in Dallas. They have those like very thin homes. I want to say I've seen them in Dallas.
Yeah. Austin used to have them significantly, and they disallowed them in a policy change in like 1984.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. That's interesting. Yeah. I know they have, gosh, I don't go up there very often anymore, but I used to a lot. Where the old airport's at. I can't think of the name.
Love Field.
Yeah. So they redeveloped that whole area. And I think instead of doing what you're talking about, they did the complete opposite. I haven't been over there in a while. I mostly stay central now. But yeah, and so and I think they actually, if I remember correctly, they set aside some of these properties for low income wage people to apply and all that kind of stuff. Fascinating. But yeah, it would make much more sense to have 4 of these or something like that.
So setting aside doing like low income units for people works if you're doing a larger development, like you're building a whole apartment building, then you can do a relatively small, some percentage of them.
Yeah.
But if you're redeveloping a single family lot, you're not building so many units that you can take a significant reduction in the income from any given unit without imperiling the whole project. And so so I like this approach, which is basically there's no money changing hands. It's just the government letting people do what they want to do.
Yeah.
And so it costs nothing. And it gives more, opportunity for people.
Yeah. I used to live on the east side. So as you know, a lot of new houses are going up over there, but, there was one of our neighbors was trying to just build like a man cave in his backyard. And like within the first week of him, putting up the foundation and all that stuff, he got like ticketed. It was like, no, you can't do it. Yeah. Because he can't do it. And then he was just doing it on the weekends at night, away from, and then sure enough, and then he got fined and there was a whole thing. I don't remember what happened, but it goes to what you were talking about. Like you couldn't just.
Yeah. So Nicole was particularly presenting some evidence that these kind of policies, this policy in the Home Act, would improve the environmental outcomes. And
sounds like it. Yeah.
Yeah. The main argument is that certainly there are a couple of benefits. Like one is that when you build like in an apartment building, when you have shared walls and things like that, you can have more efficient heating and cooling. And that's significant in Texas and elsewhere. But another big part, maybe the biggest part, is the transportation consequence. Because so if you can have a shorter commute, you might be able to ride a bike, you might be able to take a bus. You have, certainly you're sitting less in traffic, and that's going to be the major component of the savings.
Yeah, totally.
And you can walk to your local neighborhood amenities, and there's a lot to celebrate about that.
Yeah, because even now, like on that same side of town, like it's all just Airbnbs and stuff like that, and it's like, So I know you have the Protopia kind of is it a meetup, Ben, or like the Protopia stuff that you do? Like
yeah, I mean we could talk about the article in Bitcoin Magazine.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's pull that up. What is it?
It's in the Broke issue.
This one? Okay. Yeah, so tell me about the Protopia. Did you write this, or where is it at? Maybe you can tell me about it. I don't think they have it online, do they?
I think I have found it online. There was
I think we actually have this issue somewhere. Just don't know where it's placed at. Oh, right there. Protopia by Ben Woosley. I found it. Awesome. So as long as I've known you, you've always talked about this stuff. But what can you tell me about it?
Sure. So again, it's kind of getting at this idea of we need maps to orient ourselves in space and time and among ideas, and to help us identify the path forward. And so I look for ideas that are helpful in that respect.
Mm-hmm.
And this one, protopia is a term coined by Kevin Kelly. I first heard about it from a conversation between Grimes and Lex Friedman.
Okay.
And it's the idea that whereas utopia is a perfect ideal which is defined as not capable of existing, right? Like the Greek etymology is the not place.
Yeah.
And protopia is the idea that from our status quo, through incremental improvement, we can arrive at a eventually transcendent outcome. And in effect, like our current situation in many ways is transcendent compared to what we know from history, right? And so the what it calls attention to is that our incremental efforts are the path to this better outcome.
Yeah, that's something I can get behind, man. It's literally one foot in front of the other, Ben. It's that simple. I think there's just a lot of people that overthink it. But once you start seeing, like, the glass around you that you can break through, then it just gets addicting.
Yeah, it's like starting an open source project or creating a community event or doing, these other things. They all contribute to the ecosystem they develop into like the future, the culture of the future.
Yeah. And it's usually, like what you're doing, it's just like one person, right? And then 2, 3 becomes like 10, 20, 50, 100. Maybe it takes a few years, but it's how it starts, man.
Yeah. Another of my favorite sort of guiding principles is the idea of meta-utopia.
What's that?
So this comes from Robert Nozick. He's a political philosopher in a book, Anarchy, State, Utopia.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And so as a philosopher, he looks at the question of, what is a realizable vision of utopia? What is the sort of ideal outcome that we can strive for? And he says, well, everyone has different perspectives and preferences. And so you can't possibly have one utopia that everyone would be satisfied with. So instead, he says we need a meta-utopia, a utopia of utopias. And that's lots of different cultures, lots of different societies that, like, if you're unsatisfied with all the options, you can create a new society and invite everyone else to participate in it with you. And then they compete for the participation of people. And ultimately that arrives at, these kind of as close to ideal situations as possible.
Is this the same kind of theory that Balaji has about the network state stuff? It almost sounds similar to a certain extent. Maybe not the, maybe not entirely, but.
Yeah, it's very related, right? Like the network state is kind of a path to meta-utopia.
Interesting.
But if you squint, we have like, it's a matter of degrees, right? We have kind of meta-utopia in a sense in sort of the competition between states or the competition between the cities, but it's an ideal. So we can drive towards it by sort of further devolving power, further differentiating different environments and creating subcultures in new places to give people more options that are, within their purview.
Yeah. And do you think, obviously I think Bitcoin fits in this system or state.
Definitely.
Go for it.
Currency is a thing that should operate across societies as well. It can be, you can't have currency that are specific to a given society, but really what currency allows for is, one of the best roles of currency is trade across people who do not otherwise agree, right? Across, like between tribes and whatnot. So I think Bitcoin's very kind of ties these things together.
That makes a lot of sense. Is there anybody outside of yourself that's doing this in other places around the world? I know you.
Well, you can look at like the charter cities movement. So this is Patri Friedman and other people are involved in this. So this is an effort to have national governments allocate a certain amount of space to a city that is a new city and allow it to develop as under these rules, as operated by basically a private institution. And there are a few examples, I believe. So one is Prospera, I think it's in Honduras.
Oh, interesting.
And one of the ideas is that by creating these sort of free cities, you can create a context for industry that might not be welcome in other places, or might not, like it would ruffle feathers. And who needs freedom is the people who are on the fringes and want to explore new possibility, basically. So I think that's like one of the things you're seeing, or one of the things I've seen from Prospera is sort of medical treatments that aim at either like both solving medical issues, but also enhancing the body.
Right. It looks like there's 5 of them. I don't know if this is the right site or not, but it looks like there's 5 of them.
Check the
Africa.
Latin America.
And then in Latin America, there's one in, where are we at here? Honduras, yeah. Interesting. Wow.
Yeah, I think it's a nascent movement. I don't. Remains to be seen how these cities will develop and like what import they'll take. I think personally, I'm more inclined to, like, I tend towards larger city myself, so I'm less likely to be a pioneer for one of these charter cities. I'm more likely to embrace a place like Buenos Aires or Austin, and that's my kind of style of life.
Do you think it's possible, like, for us here in Austin to actually do this from within the current system that we have, or do you think it's like how hard would it be, Ben, to actually, like, try to get Austin to adopt Bitcoin on their balance sheet, or even get a Bitcoin mayor, or just move in the direction that we know as Bitcoiners is the correct path for society? What do you think? Do you think that's possible in our lifetime? I know we're striving for it individually, but do you think it's possible?
Yeah, I think it's totally possible. I think it's even inevitable.
Why?
Well,
Why do you think it's inevitable?
Well, I think it's one of the reasons you've seen uptake from politicians relative to Bitcoin is that politicians are looking to create a coalition of people that's able to succeed at the election. And Bitcoiners as single issue kind of people, they can be supported and brought in without alienating too many other folks out in the world. So I don't think it's not that difficult for a mayoral candidate to say, I support Bitcoin, and then do some things in support of Bitcoin,
right?
Because not that many. It won't cause that many issues for them. But this is one of the reasons that I would say to protect the possibility of this kind of action, it's very important that we take these environmental arguments and argue against them forcefully to kind of correct the record.
Yeah.
Like here I'm thinking of what was the video that...
Which one?
There was one about the CO2 produced by a Bitcoin mining facility.
Oh yeah, the Riot one?
That one? That's right. Yeah,
I remember that one. Yeah, that was so weird. I don't know if it'll come up or not, but yeah.
That's right. Yeah, Pierre did great on that.
Yeah, this is it right here. I think this is a response video that sure everybody's seen this by now.
We're here out in Rockdale, Texas. We've got lots of plants here. These plants are consuming CO2 and emitting oxygen, which is fantastic. When we measure CO2 out here, we're in the green. There are very low levels of CO2.
It's funny how like when
155 parts per million.
outside
of
people
CO2.
didn't understand
Just
Bitcoin humor.
Fantastic reading. Rockdale has some of the freshest air I've ever breathed. So this is a great way to establish a baseline. We're going to go inside the mining facility, and we're going to see how much is this number going to go up. If the
Do you
number
think Rockdale could be that place?
Well,
I mean, one of these, maybe not a charter city, but one of these, because isn't the mayor like he's a supporter of Bitcoin, isn't he?
So I think it's important to say it's like not a singular place, right? It's a proliferation of environments, right? Like
Yeah.
Rockdale has a certain context and a certain industry, and it's going to develop a community around that. I think there are others so another possibility is to acquire some land in unincorporated territory out in the outskirts of Austin, and then to develop that into a town. And the benefit of that relative to Rockdale is it would be closer to the city, and so you'd have those conveniences. I don't know actually how far Rockdale is. I think it's 2 hours or something away from Austin.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think Sunset Valley did that, if I'm not mistaken. Let me see. Yeah, Sunset Valley. I think they did that here in Southwest Austin. But I'm not sure how they actually did it. I used to live in Sunset Valley. It was amazing. Oh, yeah, I guess they did. But I don't know the story, how they did it, Ben. But
Well, basically you just acquire the land and articulate the principles of the place, and you build the infrastructure, and you invite people to live there with you, basically. And in this case, I think there's a lot of potential, and we're seeing some examples in various places of people who are building basically car-free cities.
okay.
Where you have, so one example is a place called Cul-de-sac in Arizona, which is instead of building apartments on top of a parking garage, they built all their housing on top of retail and no parking. And they have like a grocery store and various shops and bike facilities and things like that. And in doing that, they create an environment that's walkable, has this kind of social element. And anyway, the point there is that by developing your built environment in a different way, you can provide something distinct from the status quo that certain people will appreciate and will derive certain benefits from that. And
Yes.
I think there's a lot to be said for like a walkable urban environment.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I just pulled it up right now. So sunsetvalley.org is the website. But on September 13th, 1954, citizens in the area known as Sunset Valley voted to incorporate as a town. They elected Clinton Vilven to serve as the first mayor of the area, which now measures a little over 681 acres. Today, we remain a relatively small town, but there certainly have been a lot of changes and growth. The beginning of the first water system to serve the area occurred, and they kind of go through the history of it. But this is the only example I've ever seen happen here in Austin that I know of personally. But when you started talking about this stuff, this really piqued my interest because I was like, yeah, we totally could do like a Citadel thing. Obviously, you wouldn't call it a Citadel, or maybe we would, but it's like in Sunset Valley, for people who don't know, the area is like really, really close. It's like maybe like a 10-minute drive from downtown, I would say. It's not that far.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure the outskirts at the time in the 50s when it was bought and when it was established.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Yeah, did you see what Elon is doing? He's planning a new university in Austin.
It's pretty exciting.
What do you think about that?
I think it's awesome. I'm excited for all the projects that are developing in Austin, like the University of Austin, I think is another interesting project. And I think the idea of remaking education and making it more when you see a big storied institution failing so badly for so long,
Right.
going in this like wrong direction, I think you can you have an opportunity there to create new institutions. And so they're taking that cue and they're saying, here's an alternative, and then you get to see, you can evaluate the alternative once you create it. I think it's much better to create than to, much more productive to create than to critique the status quo.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. I think a lot of stuff that he's doing here around the area is definitely benefiting us.
Mm-hmm.
I wish the backseat of Teslas were a little bit more comfortable, but other than that,
well, they don't sell Teslas to the backseat driver.
Yeah, that's true. It's a really uncomfortable seat. What was I going to say? Yeah. So the last thing I want to touch on is just all your work that you've done, man. And I know you're not, for people at home, Ben is not the bragging type. Ben is so humble. I don't know how you stay so humble. Like, dude, it's incredible. So one day, I don't know when it was, maybe it was earlier this year. I brought this up, and I don't mean to embarrass you, but I was looking through this thing called Developers of Bitcoin that NIDIG. This just, it just happened across my desk, and I was looking through it, and I was like reading it, I was like, And then lo and behold, there's this one page that says Bitcoin's most prolific contributors. And then they go into this by ranking Bitcoin's developers by total number of commits, some interesting observations arise. And then lo and behold, who do I see at number 32? Mr. Ben Woosley. Dude, what? Like, I didn't know this. What?
Yeah.
Like, look, dude. Okay, so let me just brag for you. 2018, 69 commits. 2020, 37. 2021, 26. 2022. Wait. No, wait. 2020, 26, 2021, 4, 2022, 8, for a total of 144. And that's 77% cumulative total. Crazy, man. Like, what? This whole time when I saw this, I was looking through it and I was like, Ben? And then I think I told you the next time I saw it, I was like, dude, did you know your names? And you're like, I guess.
Yeah, it's a funny thing. It's like so I can just tell the story of how I got involved. Like, I was, like, Bitcoin for me started, even before Bitcoin, it started with, maybe it started with reading Milton Friedman's Free to Choose in high school, or, getting involved in the Ron Paul campaign for president in like 2004.
Mm-hmm.
So Ron Paul talked about inflation and the dangers, or basically the damage that the Federal Reserve does to America, forcefully. And he talked about how it feeds the war machine and how it does these other things, and basically convinced me at that time that we need some alternative to the Federal Reserve. But there wasn't really, Bitcoin didn't exist, but it was enough to know that it was a problem. And then I got involved. I've been involved in the Free State Project for a good while, and I've been attending conferences there. And they that community is very interested in alternative currencies because, for the same reason, they see the problem with the Federal Reserve. They're looking to, create some alternative for themselves so they don't participate in that. And so basically, when I first heard of Bitcoin, I was in 2012, and I wanted to succeed. Right, it was this fledgling project, and was just an open source project, and I did some small things at that time, and it wasn't until later, I didn't really consider to work on Bitcoin though, until it was 2017. And
what were you doing at that time? Were you just
all throughout, in my career, primarily I've been working in web development and Ruby on Rails.
Okay.
And so working on startups or consulting in San Francisco at the time.
Okay.
And in 2017, I had left one company and I was planning to join another, which is a startup that my friend was starting. And I took a month off in between, And this was in the middle of the ICO bubble. So it was very dynamic time, lots of new projects popping up and things like that. And I spent that month basically reading white papers and watching videos. And by the end of it, I was obsessed. And particularly there was one video of about the Lightning Network that was articulated by Taj Durja and Joseph Poon. And that was they described in that basically scaling blocks could not get you to the amount of throughput you would need to accommodate the global economy, but payment channels could get you a lot of the way there. So once I realized that Bitcoin could accommodate the global economy, that's a big deal, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And at the same time, there are all these projects popping off. Everyone and their mother was like launching a coin, and I was like, wait a minute, we're just like distracting ourselves with all these, pointless, these like self-serving kind of alternatives. Mm-hmm. And in the process, we're neglecting Bitcoin. And so I thought, well, I should help correct the balance there by like focusing on Bitcoin. And because at that time, the Lightning Network was getting close to being ready for further kind of use and development. Basically, the Lightning Labs and other organizations had been building their node implementations, and those node implementations included an interoperability test suite that was people were tracking it on Reddit and other places, showing like how the progress that was being made in terms of higher and higher levels of interoperability. And so I had the sense that it was time to focus on the next step, which would be the wallet software. It's like once you have the node, you need the wallet to interact with it to like do your daily business. And so I went on GitHub and I looked for open source Lightning wallet software, and I found a few, and one I ended up contributing to was Zap Desktop. So this is a project of Jack Mallers, who now runs Strike. And the reason I chose Zap Desktop was because it was BSD licensed rather than GPL licensed, MIT licensed. Yeah, there you go. And so that means it's kind of commercially available. You can use it as a commercial project.
I remember using this.
Nice.
Not on the desktop, but wasn't there an app too? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I used to use this, the app,
mobile and
before Zeus. I used to use it.
Yeah. So you can look at my contributions there.
Gosh, that's crazy.
Yeah. So anyway, I just started trying to help out and improve the code and that kind of thing. And then I did a bit of that. And then at some point, Jack had his concussion. That was in 2018, I suppose. And so that kind of put a pause on the project. So mm-hmm. I went looking to do something else, and I decided to try my hand at core development. And so,
how is that different than Lightning development? Just for the plebs at home.
Sure. So Zap is implemented in JavaScript, and it's an application, and so it's more like model view controller communication of basically buttons that perform actions that invoke the node that result in some operation there.
Okay.
Whereas Bitcoin is more like system software. It's like it has different components for doing the coin selection and the communicating with your peers and whatnot. So it's much more. I would say it's a more complex software, and it's more involved.
Okay.
And it's implemented in C++.
Oh, that's a big thing, right?
Yeah. So so I think a common thing, I think in all open source development, it's easy to be intimidated by the software, right? To to throw your hands up, like, I don't understand this, or I'm not going to be able to help with this. And I was lucky in that I had some prior history in open source contributions. So like I contributed some things to Ruby on Rails, and that was really where I got my kind of practice in terms of like how my approach works. And I developed the kind of confidence in making these contributions. And so in this case, what I do with software that I just that I'm not familiar with, right? Like initially you're ignorant of the software, and then you have to kind of you have to climb the learning curve in order to be productive in it. And so that this curve kind of deters a lot of people. So what I do with that instead is I just make like sort of cleanup and refactoring commits. And so I look for opportunities to simplify the code base, to add, additional checks, to, we can pull up examples of what I've done on Bitcoin.
Yeah, let's see it. Let's go here. We're going over to your GitHub.
Sure.
Impact. Just Bitcoin Core right here.
So if you go to contributors on the right.
915 contributors. And where am I going here now?
You gotta scroll down I'll be down towards the bottom of this page, I think.
That's amazing, dude. Wow, look at that.
So just click on 150 commits.
Wow. So you still work on it to this day then? It looks like your last one was 6 months ago?
I mean, so I've been much less active recently. And
well, it's because you're building Protopia.
Yeah, it's true. I've got other things that are like keeping me busy.
Yeah.
But yeah, some of my pull requests, which have been outstanding, have been merged even long after
Congrats on that, man. It's really cool to see. I'm gonna see if I can. Gosh, it's amazing, dude. Thank you for your service, man.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to bring that up. I was amazed when I saw it. And I was just like, and I think I went around the lab that day. I was like, did you know this about? They're like, yeah, man. And I was like, but did you know he's on the list? He's on this list. But yeah,
it's true. So, I mean, part of the reason I do it, or I have done it, and maybe I'll get back to it in the future, is that there's, the code base is forever. Like the history is recorded in Git. And
interesting.
If Bitcoin does what we want it to do, then I'll be proud to have been associated in this way with it, to be able to contribute in the ways I've been able to contribute. And
that's such a great way to look at it, man. You'll be in the history books.
Driving out into the sun, let the ultraviolet cover me up. We're looking for a creation myth. Ended up with a pair of cracked lips. Windows down, scream along to some America First rap country song.